The reason I wanted to speak to you is that you've been making quite a lot of noise about a particular bill that's going through the House of Lords, and I mean, I'm not sure what stage it's at the moment, but I'm sure you can tell us. But this is a headline from City AM. Passing the Public Authorities Bill will hand away Brits' privacy rights. Um, and I've looked at the bill and there's a lot of powers being given to a new body. Can you explain what's going on with this and the repercussions of it, Prem?
Well, yeah, sure. The bill that you referred to, called the Public Authorities Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill, it's in really two parts, and it's the second part which I'm really going to talk about a bit. The second part focuses on tackling what they call benefit fraud, and it is the most draconian bill ever tabled in British Parliament. It has already been passed by the House of Commons. It is going through the House of Lords now, where it is meeting resistance. And I have also tabled a number of amendments to oppose parts of it. Now, the background is that the government says that last year there was some £6.5 billion of welfare fraud, which represents about 2.7% of the total benefits paid. Now, the key part of the bill is the government is assuming that anyone who receives benefits basically has criminal tendencies and therefore must be denied financial privacy. Since benefits are handled by the Department of Work and Pensions, or DWP, the DWP will have powers to compel banks and financial institutions to look at the accounts of benefit claimants and provide information which DWP demands. Now, in order to provide this information, banks will have to obviously develop some kind of algorithms and provide the information. What exactly DWP wants to know at the moment, we are not told. That will form part of a code of practice, which is due to appear soon. So what that means is the House of Commons has passed legislation without seeing the details. That is what a large majority does for you. So banks are actually not keen on this endeavor, because you can imagine a tiny error in the information provided by banks, and we know computers are not 100% reliable, as the post office scandal shows us, and the banks could face liabilities of all sorts of liabilities for misinforming DWP. But the important point is, in order to snoop on the benefit claimants' bank accounts, the government does not need any court order. The affected individuals will not be told. There is absolutely no right of appeal against this mass surveillance. At the moment, the government can demand information from anyone suspected of fraud on a case-by-case basis, but that is not going to be the case in the future. So let's just give an example. Suppose DWP wants to know if anyone has savings in excess of £16,000. I mentioned £16,000 because that is the limit for claiming universal credit. So basically, DWP then writes to the bank. The bank has to check all the accounts which that named person might have, and then provide the information. Now, suppose you're given a loved one £1,000 to buy a new piece of furniture or get repairs done to the house. That now sits in a bank account. Will that now suggest that they have savings in excess of £16,000? And therefore they should lose some or all of their universal credit? The government has really dodged those kind of questions. The ministers have not really answered those kind of questions. How will the banks decide whether savings are actually savings? So basically, once DWP has provided information, once banks have provided information to DWP, then DWP officials decide if it gives rise to some suspicions. Now, the question is, how many bank accounts will be looked at? So suppose people have a half a dozen bank accounts. There are 7.5 million people on universal credit. You can multiply 7.5 by 6, and that is 45 million bank accounts. How many transactions will the banks actually be trawling through? Well, again, you can imagine how many transactions each bank account may actually have. So once DWP's suspicions are aroused, those suspicious circumstances are then communicated to the individual in question. And then the Secretary of State decides, doesn't need a court order, he decides how to recover the money. Okay, so the Secretary of State can decide to recover the money, which could be a deduction from somebody's wages, which could be simply taking the money from the bank account. So they can just take the money straight from the bank account. The DWP is also taking powers to apply for and secure search warrants to enter premises and seize evidence, whatever evidence they think is relevant. At the moment, only police has the power to raid premises. Even if HMRC wants to raid you, they need some kind of a court order. Well, that will not be needed anymore. Now, those individuals who are affected by this form of surveillance and powers won't really be given any state-backed legal aid or advice on how to challenge DWP. They will basically be on their own. So DWP can also apply for a court order to disqualify a debtor from driving for 2 years if that debtor refuses to make the repayments, which is kind of strange. I always thought that driving license depended on whether you have insurance, you had driving lessons, you're a safe driver, you can follow the law. But no, that will not really happen. So these driving bans are not applied to tax evaders, money launderers, ID thieves, you name it, they're not really applied to any of those. Now, through these surveillance powers, the government claims that it will save £1.5 billion over 5 years. That is £300,000 a year. So what is the government's total expenditure for the current financial year? £1,335 billion. And it is bringing in these laws to save about £300,000 a year. So who will actually be affected by this obnoxious legislation? Initially, they are targeting recipients of 3 benefits: universal credit, pension credit, and employment support allowance. And of course, we know that the disability benefits are under scrutiny, and I have no doubt that in time that will also be added to the list. The government is saying a great deal about pensioners. It is saying pensioners won't be covered by this law, which is not quite true, because if you get pension credit, you are going to be affected by this. And also there are problems. For example, I have had in my family individuals who've been severely ill for many years. Nobody would open a bank account for them because they were not considered to be fit enough. So inevitably, their money been paid into a joint account. So if this money goes into if benefits go into a joint account, the other joint account holder also becomes subject to surveillance. If housing benefit received by somebody, for example, pensioners, because they get pension credit and that they get housing benefit, and the housing benefit goes directly to the landlord's bank accounts too come under surveillance. The government has not really offered a full clarity on that, but we are pushing. Lots of benefits are paid to British people resident abroad, in other words, in a foreign bank account. They are totally excluded from this surveillance. So basically, this surveillance is a penalty because somebody lives in the UK. So that is, again, ridiculous. So what is the level of fraud on universal credit which is being targeted? It is about 10.9%, which is quite significant. It is about 4.5% for pension credit. And I can't help wondering whether a lot of this fraud is there, or what they call fraud is there, because the forms are too complex and long to fill. I sat down with a pensioner to help her to fill the pension credit form, and the pension credit form was 22 pages long, had 243 questions, and it took her 4 hours to go to fill that with me. She had no computer, no access to a mobile phone. So the question is, at what point does an error in completing a form become a fraud? At what point, anyone who receives benefit payments or gets PIP, I mean, there are all kind of intrusive personal questions. If you're receiving PIP, the form is 50 pages long. And some people may be reluctant to answer those questions or give the information to a complete stranger. So the question is, at what point do these innocent sort of replies are construed as fraud? And that is really, really a problem. So what the government is doing is creating a new underclass, which will have absolutely no right to financial privacy. And that is in violation of the equality laws in this country. That is in violation of Article 8 and 14 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Government has not really indicated who exactly will be liable for errors which a bank might make, or if the DWP people get on the wrong path and come to conclude that somebody has committed fraud. So the government's not really been forthcoming on that at all. So again, it will be interesting to see. But really something very disturbing is the state directly accessing people's bank accounts. How long before these powers are misused and applied to trade union leaders, trade union activists, protesters, anybody the government doesn't like? So I think we are opening a Pandora's box, which we really need to kind of think about very, very carefully. As I said earlier, these surveillance laws will not apply to thieves, tax dodgers, money launderers, scammers, disqualified company directors, MPs, and lords who've been engaged in overclaiming expenses. Perhaps they are the first people these things should apply to, but they're all exempt. So, in a nutshell, this is the latest stage of a class war, which Labour has unleashed. And this bill is actually a copy of a bill which Conservatives tried to introduce before the last election. And at that time, the bill was called Data Protection and Digital Information Bill. So the Tories have promised a full support for this bill. So the irony is, in the Lords, Labour can only get this bill through with the Conservative support. Lib Dems have indicated that they will oppose some parts of it. Lots of crossbenchers are not very happy about it. I'm not happy about it either, and many other Labour peers are not happy about it either. But the government is determined to push this through, and I think this is really a terrible, terrible piece of legislation which we should all be resisting.
Well, you've got all the detail there, Prem. I have to say, you always have the detail. But the thing about this is, as you say, it sets a precedent, doesn't it? I mean, they can start moving into other areas. I mean, so pensioners are affected by this effectively.
Well, yes, I mean they have I think in a sense they have listened to the backlash on winter fuel payment and said at the moment state pensions are exempt, where the level of fraud is close to zero anyway. But I think, this is just a vendetta against the poor. And you're going to say, what, £300,000 a year? I'm not saying we shouldn't be cutting fraud. We should not be targeting fraudsters, but this is utterly disproportionate. And that's why I was saying the government needs to look at the length of the forms, the complexity, and also they already have the tools to go after fraudsters. So if they are saying, they're basically softening up people by saying we are going after fraudsters, but then not all the fraudsters, only aiming for the poor, the old, the sick, the disabled, the unfortunate. That is the ones, they are aiming for. So first they went after families with children, then they went after pensioners, then they're going after the disabled. Now anybody who's basically unfortunate and on benefits. And there's a sort of a pattern here, and that pattern is really highly disturbing.
I mean, the other thing about this is they keep putting forward means tested benefits. So that makes it more likely that people will have to fill in forms that they could then be shown to be fraudulent on. If they're not means tested, they wouldn't have that, would they, at all? But most of the proposals this government's making are for means tested benefits, aren't they?
Well, I think the trouble is with means testing, as I gave you the example of the lady I spent 4 hours with, people then will simply not claim benefits. You'll have more people living in poverty. The banks that I've spoken to, some bank directors who are very concerned that they will become direct agents of the state in surveillance. Some banks may well not open any accounts for benefit claimants. So therefore, you will end up with financial exclusion. If landlords become target to surveillance, they might say, well, okay, I don't want to receive the rent directly paid to me for somebody. But that is something the government has been encouraging for years and years to have a housing benefit paid directly to landlords. So some disabled groups I have met are very concerned that homelessness will increase. And the other part is that this bill has not really been accompanied by what I call a full impact assessment. So when you ask the ministers, tell us what the consequences would be, they are unable to answer the questions. And the last time when we tackled the minister in the Lords, the reply was, "Oh, I'm running out of time," and basically got out of it that way, as though there is a limit on answering questions arising from a bill. There is no limit, but the minister basically just got out of that. So I think there will be all sorts of consequences. And I actually think there will be a huge number of scandals in the future about this. And, people will find a lot of innocent people have been deprived of benefits they should have been getting. A lot of people will not apply just to simply escape this surveillance and bureaucracy. And I think there will be scandals, a bit like the post office scandal and the indefinite prison sentences scandal, because you get a flavor in Parliament to say, when David Blunkett was Home Secretary, we must punish the criminals and throw away the key, and they did. And thousands of people ended up with indefinite prison sentences. Now, oh, we must tackle the skivers, we must tackle the benefit fraudsters, and they don't really want to listen to any reasoning of any kind. Government has a huge majority. That majority should be used to enable everyone to live a fulfilling life, not to actually kick people who are already down. And that is what they are doing.
Can you tell us what stage it's at in Parliament? I mean, is it too late to lobby MPs, or has this gone to the Lords? Does that mean it's at a reading stage that we can't be stopped?
Well, in the Lords, we have had the second reading, is currently in the committee stage, and a lot of amendments are being discussed. So it is definitely worth lobbying the Lords and the MPs, because after the Lords finish with this bill, there will be lots of amendments, there will be disagreements, and that the bill will then go back to the House of Commons for further consideration. And hopefully some MPs can be persuaded to see the sense. But, one of the most obnoxious things, why remove people's driving license? So imagine if you are a carer and inadvertently you overclaimed benefit. Now you're suddenly banned from driving. How on earth are you going to get to work and earn the money? And if you live in a rural area and there is no public transport, what on earth are you going to do? Well, this is just crazy. And I think this is just a government way of also frightening people because no magistrate with any decency will impose a driving ban on somebody when that person says, sorry, Your Honor, if you withdraw my driving license, I won't be able to earn a living. I won't be able to go anywhere because I live in a rural location. I won't be able to take my sick parents to the hospital. I won't be able to take children to school. So, all these questions have been asked, but the minister's not been able to answer any of them so far. And they don't probably want to answer. So I think it is worth lobbying, demonstrating, writing. I would urge everyone watching this program to insist on seeing their MP face to face and tell them about what the consequences are likely to be. Don't just send them an email. That if that's all you can do, that's fine. But see them face to face, disrupt their lives, remind them of what real life is all about.